All right. Well, thanks, everyone. That was a lot of information, certainly, that both Ron and Charlie presented. It's been a journey, certainly, and I think some of the things that you're going to hear moving forward, and some of the important things about AASHTOWare really are the collaboration that you get with this environment. And I'm going to speak to that in 2 slides. And then I will turn it over to Gina to really get into the details of the implementation. So Gina, I'll have you move forward 1 slide, please.
Okay.
So this really talks about the materials TRT and how it originally was formed. It was formed back in St. Louis, and the goal of the TRT was to take a look at a number of requirements relating to materials. There was a materials facet of a product called Site Manager, which was the predecessor to AASHTOWare construction materials. And really, as we looked at materials and we assessed it during that process, we talked a lot about not wanting to reinvent Site Manager, but to take the requirements of a lot of DOTs who are interested in moving materials forward. Some of you on the call may or may not know, at one point we met with New York, and they came and they showed us the LIMS portion of Site Manager, and we also met with Nebraska after a visit with New York and looked at what they had done with their implementation. So Jim Cusick was the original person involved in the TRT, looked at a number of the requirements, and ultimately went down to Florida to be involved in the materials TRT. And a lot of meetings, a lot of conversations, a lot of looking at requirements, and a lot of analysis to get to this point that we are to today. And I'll have Gina go to the next slide. And I think one of the most important things about AASHTOWare is the collaboration amongst states. It really is a special environment. We don't have the ability to do that with a lot of different softwares. I've been involved in software development pretty much all my life. I can speak to Bentley because I was very involved with Bentley systems, and they started out as a pretty small software. Everyone had a lot of input to that software, and then it grew into this giant, which a lot of DOTs no longer really have a lot of input to what goes on with development. And you can say the same about a lot of other enterprise systems. The 2 things I really want to emphasize, I think, one is collaboration, and you're going to hear that time and time again. A lot of people make this process work, and a lot of time and effort and process. And really the key, one of the key underpinnings to development is a process called solicitation. And AASHTO has went out to numerous solicitations to do software development. They did it for CRL, they did it for pre-construction, they did it for estimation, and they did it for construction and materials. And MnDOT has been involved in every one of them. And again, I want to tell you very, very point blank that AASHTOWare is an enterprise system. It is no longer a small system that is used by a subset of individuals. It is an enterprise system that feeds the entire state, and it is workflow based. back to some of the questions that were asked, talking about how it moves from one phase to the next. AASHTO has a very unique workflow environment in it, and in order to move it from the point of a proposal to a contract to award to ultimately a project being closed. So everyone has a distinct part in the process, and without you know, the investment of a lot of agencies, like you see here, you know, these things don't get built, and certainly it was very important to a lot of these agencies. Michigan was, it was so important to Michigan, they invested quite a bit more money than the original 750 to implement from each individual state. And just to give you a little bit of perspective on this, MnDOT's investment initially was $750,000. Construction, Jenny and Jessica did a fantastic job with implementing construction. Gina was very involved in that. You know, we were able to get that software up and running and you know, utilizing that software for quite a while now. And so again, hats off to those individuals. But just to give you a perspective on how much software development does cost, California did go out to RFP to do a construction materials system. The initial price tag was $15 million on that software. And as I was dealing with the construction engineer there, ultimately that project grew to be $21 million. So it is a significant investment to do software development. And in the days of really trying to do software development internally are over. And not to say that some of that can't get done, but if you really want to invest in a large system, you really have to collaborate, or you have to have really deep pockets. And so all that being said, then you know, I think the words I want you to remember are collaboration and the unified database. I think you're going to hear a lot about that moving forward. And Dave asked the question about integrations. That is we are just on the tip of the iceberg with integrations right now. That is really important to AASHTO. And that's part of the reason why AASHTO rebranded and became really one big product. Bridge and pavement and safety and project was the ability to integrate those systems and to find a commonality between those systems that didn't talk before. And so I have 2 slides. I'm not going to turn it into 50. So I certainly thanks everyone. I'm going to go eat my ice cream and apple crisp right now and turn it over to Gina.
That looks really yummy, Todd. Thank you very much. That was wonderful information. You always learn so much every time you participate, even every time. Information. Okay, a little bit, I'll introduce myself a little bit here too for you. I grew up in Missouri, and I worked for the Missouri DOT for 8 years, 5.5 years in the field as a construction inspector, and also worked in the asphalt plants and concrete plants and helped the district materials with their testing. Then I worked in headquarters for 2.5 years as the construction automation liaison analyst. I was the techie person in one of the field offices, and they asked me, come to Jefferson City and represent St. Louis. I was like, okay. I'm like, we want to keep you. So that was really great. I love the field, and I love the automation. And then I went to work for Infotech in 2000. So it's been 20 years I've been working for Infotech this month as an implementation project manager with many agencies. And it's been wonderful, wonderful working with Minnesota. All right. The next slide on here, let's see. So AASHTOWare Project 3.0, the beta installation, I was the beta coordinator for 3.0, and we had there were a few states who were beta agencies testing 3.0, and Minnesota was one of them, and Minnesota did a fantastic job. You guys, let me see, we went on site in June 2014, and we had a couple people here to do the installation of AASHTOWare project. I remember sitting there and we were talking about the materials and construction implementation too. And at that point in time, Minnesota was looking for a MnDOT project manager. So there was a project manager, his name's Dave Johnson, he's recently retired. And we have Karen as the project manager now. And so that was a little installation of AASHTOWare project. And it was nice. We were able to talk about the future plans for the implementation at that time, way back in beta. So that was in June. It's supposed to be released later that year. For the actual beta testing, MnDOT tested construction and materials, and he also picked in and tested some CRL, like in pre-construction for us. Like you jumped in and put all the different hats on and contributed greatly. We had on-sites for a couple of the sessions there. We had a few people. We had Jim Ferguson and Sarah Farmery for construction training, materials training while actually going through the beta testing. We had Jennifer McAllister for estimation. You guys were testing estimation, and Erica Dartry as well. And so you guys did all of the modules at the time. You were testing a lot, and it was very appreciated at this. You had 12 construction beta testers and materials. In November of 2014, we had a little conference call to talk about pre-release support for construction and materials for the implementation. And it was just going through and talking about what MnDOT would like to do. Dave Johnson was newly hired as the PM at that time. And we went through what the project might include for support. And so that was just the very beginning of Infotech getting involved into helping Minnesota with your implementation of materials. I do have a couple slides in here for construction because it was happened during this time frame, and they do have an effect on the materials implementation as well with lessons learned and information. So construction, the training services, Infotech helped you guys with training. And at that time, there was a generic training guide that was created with no MnDOT customizations included. There's training exercise values for the class to go through. There is a training database, and we used a backup hosted solution for all the classes at that time. And I remember that Jenny and Sonia went through and worked through like different questions for the class and the values, and worked through different procedure questions and information. And at that time there was Jenny, so there was a team of people that kind of went around the circle of the state and went through all the different districts from March through April, hit all the 10 districts classes. And there was a train-the-trainer session right at the beginning. So there was Jenny Carlson, Rick Beckus, who's retired from MnDOT now. He actually works for Infotech now. He lives in Alaska. Marty Peel and Greg Johnson. And then from Infotech was myself, John Oberdeek, Sonia Dooley, and Jim Ferguson. And that was a great trip. And I remember asking, we were talking about like how to do material exceptions during that time. And we've got that included as part of the joint construction material session on how that's handled in construction right now via change order. So that topic came up during that time. In January 2015, we had an on-site to talk about the joint functionality of all of AASHTOWare projects. And that unified database, Todd's coming up right here. So we met in headquarters and reviewed all the different functionality that was shared amongst pre-construction, CRNL, construction materials, training, support, and went through a lot of topics. Things such as the vendor list the item master list, all those, the code tables, and where are they shared at, and what are the values from other parts of the program that uses that same component, that same screen, that same window, and it's based on role security and the data that needs to be populated in those shared data. So that was a really good session. I really enjoyed that one. It was good to go through that very thoroughly. We also worked on an upgrade plan for the software that encompassed all the different functional groups and the environments. We went over to the central lab and reviewed the binder lab existing processes and talked about a project plan for the implementation. And we did a little lab walkthrough of the lab while we were looking at that. Remember, Alan Gallistel was there. I have many pictures of you, Alan, from that walkthrough. That was really good, very helpful to see that, to view that information. From there, there was a steering committee that started meeting, and Dave Johnson, he was the facilitator of it. I have a little screen capture of what it looks like here with the steering committee at that time. We had, like, let's see, I was looking at some of the people that were on there that are still in here right now today, and like Nancy Toppenberger and Val, Tom Raven, and Glenn, and Alan, you're here now. Jim, I think you were, like, as you helped Jim with that sometime with topics. So Glenn, Kim Collins, Todd, they should be on this list. I think you're definitely a part of it, a part of this here. I think this was just as it was getting together and getting started here. So steering committee, which involved the different heads meeting together and going through topics for AASHTOWare project. And I think you guys are still meeting today with your steering committee. We're looking at Charlie, taking his head yes. Those very important decisions there that are made on your steering committee. In November of 2015, we started up the detailed requirements analysis for the implementation of materials functionality. I was looking at a list of people who helped and contributed. I have a slide later that shows the quantity of people who've helped in the materials implementation in MnDOT, and it's great. You have many resources that contribute toward this. We went on site. We did a tour of the lab, and we reviewed business processes in all of the different lab units. And as you can see this list, when we were meeting at the beginning, we were trying to figure out how it would be coordinated and what all the labs are. You guys have specialty offices, which is a little bit different from other agencies. You guys ensure this level of quality throughout the labs, that you also bring in, during this analysis, you bring in the fields, like the whole process. You make sure everybody, every title, every position is covered in that process thoroughly. And I just want a little hats off to Maria Maston for the extra work she did, creating the flow charts, being thoroughly, just making sure every process was completely vetted thoroughly to make sure it was incorporated for analysis of AASHTOWare project and the materials part of it. It was really good. We did a little follow-up webinar in February because we needed to gather a little bit more process, preventive maintenance, the pavement preservation area, microsurfacing, mixed design process, and bituminous seal coat. And then we delivered the very final deliverable May 4th, 2016. And in that, we did an analysis on what the schedule could be. An all-at-once schedule was 2.5 years. That's implementing everything all at one time. And that's the way we geared the implementation toward it first. Another possibility was going lab by lab, which would have taken 5 years at that time. But there was a need for getting off LabVantage. It was known at the time a little bit, like when you look at getting off of LabVantage as part of one of these goals here. So we were trying to push it with the 2.5 years. I'm going through this as a timeline. So in May 2016, There's a group called the Materials Technical Advisory Group. And so we just had the analysis. And then in May 2016, Jim Cusick joined the NTAG representing Minnesota. So the Materials Technical Advisory Group, they go through the ticketed modification request, the enhancement request of the software, and they look at it and see if it would be good for it to be included for the health of the program for all agencies. That's what they're looking at. And they keep in mind, there are representatives right now, I think from 23 different agencies. And so they get together once a month for about an hour and they review a ticketed modification request, TMRs. And they look at them and see if they want to endorse them for being incorporated into the program. The project task force takes that, they look at that from all the different tags of functionality areas, and they look at that as, hey, what do they think is just one piece of looking at what should be included in that next release. So I have a little bit of emphasis here to help the PTF. They also bring up different topics like agency view development. So they've been developing agency views as well as an action team, generic agency views. So right now, Alan Gallistel is your representative. He started representing in August 2019. So he's your representative right now. They do a lot of work. In fact, there's a lot of work. One little hour, but they do a lot of work. Okay. In 2016, July, construction functionality was placed into production. This was very exciting. I have some stats here from Dave Johnson, the PM, the previous PM. On July 20th, generated the first progress payment estimate. July 22nd, contractor received payment. July 21st, fifth stats here. And it's how many DWRs, how many contracts there were per location, the daily diaries, change orders, and progress pay estimate. On August 11th, the second estimate that was generated and paid to the contractor. That was really great. Minnesota was way ahead of the entire user community in getting construction and production. An implementation planning meeting occurred in September 2016. And this meeting, the purpose of this was to meet with the project management core team, stakeholders, to review what would the implementation of AASHTOWare project materials be? What are those main structures? So we went through the implementation structure, and we went through a decision hierarchy and escalation process. Who, like at what level will people make decisions, and then can the leader of that area override it because they need to bring it up, and you need to bring it up. And then it goes to the PM core team, or it goes to the implementation team, and it goes up to the PM core team, then goes up to the steering committee. And then with input from the governance committee on something that was across multiple modules and brought back. The project schedule was reviewed in detail. It was a very thorough review of the project schedule. The implementation database and setup of it so that there would be an implementation database for the implementation. That was really good. What would the configuration and the customization request process be? And how would you document the configurations? You guys have done an excellent job with documenting them right in the custom metadata code, or marking that information up at the top. So you know who did it and when and pretty much why. Identified the subcommittee members. We reviewed what the subcommittees would be and identified potential subcommittee members for all the subcommittees. Reviewed what the file administration archival process would be for the implementation files. Created a SharePoint site that we use. We still use it today. We have the analysis archived in it. We have the implementation information in it. Many files are in there, the calendar, and I think it's a very, very helpful tool. The implementation member estimated percent of effort and duration. And we reviewed what would it take, what percent of time would resources be needed for. A project tracking tool. We have business procedures. We reviewed for each component in the system, how would the system be for the implementation? What documents would you need for that? A communication plan, created a kickoff plan for the kickoff, and reviewed steering committee, project core team, and implementation team members. Also, communications with supervisors so that people work on the implementation. The supervisors of those resources were communicated with that could support their resources. And it's really nice. And there are attendees who attended that session, the implementation planning meeting. That was a really nice, good work. The kickoff for the implementation materials was in June 12th through the 15th of 2017. The project actually started on April 27, 2017. So we got that up and going within a few, about 1.5 months of the project starting. Started the kickoff. Here's the structure of the implementation on phase 1. So it was steering committee at the top, PM core team, your implementation team here, referred to the governance team. We use action teams if an action item took more than one person to perform. And here's the subcommittee structure for the subcommittees and the experts in. We had people for sample process flow, mix designs, the qualifications, global acceptance actions, laboratories, construction materials functionality, sources and facilities, your producers or suppliers, source inspection and material quantities, system administration, your global functionality, training, support, and communication, report development, that is going high right now, testing, technical data, getting data from one site to another site. How do you put that over to in the production site? Technical environment, the environment's upgrades, agency view development, that is high up right now as well, as far as data population. The implementation tasks are that all the subcommittees, most of the subcommittees worked on was identifying procedure determinations, what the configuration modifications would be, the data that needed to be populated and populating it, identifying system event determinations, which are kind of like database triggers and notifications, agency view determinations and development. Did you need an agency view developed for your area? Report determinations and development. Are any interfaces needed? There are some. The environment and system updates, role determinations and creations. We'll learn about roles when Gail gives her a little overview of AASHTOWare project. Training development, testing, training deployment, production placement, post-production support, and project closing. There were approximately 113 or more, probably more people involved in the implementation. 96 for the implementation. This is MnDOT and MnDOT folk only, not Infotech. The analysis used additional 17 people. And I'm sure they're probably being pulled in and working in the labs during the implementation too. It's a lot of people, and I'm sure this number is higher than that. We had a change request 1 happen in October 2017 with the LIMS rapid replacement inclusion. We needed to do something different to help with the LIMS rapid replacement plan. So we decided to change things up and divide the plan into 2 phases and work on getting all the labs within the central lab and the district labs who use LabVantage on the AASHTOWare project as fast as possible, and then put everything else as a phase 2, construction and the remaining functionality that wasn't included in LIMS itself. Change request 2 happened in July of 2018, which incorporated training development and training deployment. So during the analysis stage, there were many different types of training that could be included, but it wasn't until the training, communications, and support subcommittee got together and identified what the training development should be for the project that the scope was identified here. Production placement, July 25th, 2019. Get ready. Here we go. It was some of the excitement that happened that morning on that. We had a web session set up and ready to go. Portions of the central office lab unit were placed into production, cement lab, chem analytical lab unit. It was a very exciting time. You were live with material. Change request 3 happened. We went through and identified the project schedule end date being extended out. So this is basically working with Minnesota and Infotech we push it out to November 30th, 2021. The implementation method was modified from all at once to a lab by lab and location methodology. So at this time in November 2019, this is the schedule that was identified and determined. So this is the phase that just went into production right here. And you're working on this one now. And Karen and Suzanne have some more information about timeline in a little bit. Change request 3. This one here happened to mitigate agency view submittals. We identified that the time it took to identify the details of what's needed included in an agency view, that's kind of like a template, another component in the program, it took some time. So Infotech was asked to jump in and help here. And so we have 2 business analysts that have been working with Minnesota, and they are helping identify what the agency view submittal will be so that they can get developed. And this has helped a lot in getting some of the agency views developed and helping getting those into production. Production placement phase 2 happened in April 2020. The rest of the cement lab and chemical analytical lab unit and districts that use rock salt also. That was a little surprise. I was like, woo, districts are being pulled in. That was really, really nice. Currently implementing tasks for aggregate lab and trial mix lab unit by 2 minutes. Any questions? Don't see any questions in the Q&A. And it looks like we're right on time for our break.